This is the untiring John Chambers, a man of many talents and a global technocrat. In his 2 decades of running Cisco, Chambers transformed the computer networking startup into a dominant global tech company, growing its revenues from $1.2 billion to nearly $50 billion by the time he stepped down as CEO in 2015. Today, as a venture capitalist and a tech leader, Chambers has been promoting the broader development of both US and India as startup nations to harness the power of technology, especially as the decade of AI truly begins, which he believes will be the most fundamental tech change ever, greater than the internet and cloud combined, and one that will bring India and the US closer. Chambers is currently the chairman of the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, which through its network of more than 400 global companies fosters closer public-private sector collaborations along the Indo-US corridor. Hello and welcome to Voices from the Valley. I'm Shereen Bhan, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome back on the program John Chambers. John, what an absolute pleasure to have you back on the program. And thank you for letting us film here in your beautiful home. It's absolutely stunning.
Well, it's an honor to be back together. I was looking, we've been doing interviews together for over 20 years. You clearly started when you were a teenager. I was a little bit over.
I wish.
And this is one of the most fun interviews I do every year with you. It's also unique looking at the Valley. You see San Francisco, Silicon Valley, Oakland, San Jose, and it's kind of, if you will, the birthplace of the new generation of startups and of high tech leading the world. So a fitting place to be.
A fitting place to be. And speaking of startups and high tech, the Wall Street Journal has a front page today on comparing what you did with Cisco and what's happening at Nvidia today.
Yes.
And Cisco was in 2000 the most valued company in the world on the back of the big transition that we saw then with the internet. And that's what we're seeing happen with Nvidia becoming the most valued company. As people draw these comparisons,
yes,
what's going through your mind?
Well, first of all, it shows you that technology moved from something that the techies did to impacting every one of our lives. So with the internet, changing the way you work, live, learn, and play, when I said that in '93, most people said, no, it's techies talking. It clearly did. As you watch, there's new generations of leaders about every 10 or 20 years. And I think it's very healthy. So it was Cisco for the internet, then about 4 or 5 players for the cloud, and now Nvidia is clearly leading in terms of AI. And they're kind of like the indication of the infrastructure of AI. If you want to know how AI is doing, look at how fast Nvidia is growing. And it is growing great. What is it, 540% in the last 2 years. What is also going through is the parallels. The parallels in terms of it changing our lives, changing the future of companies. If you weren't an internet company in the mid-90s, major players like Fidelity wouldn't even invest in your stock.
Yeah.
Today, if you're not into AI and if you haven't got a good AI strategy, well, implementation, investors won't invest in your company, even if you're a manufacturing company or a semiconductor company, et cetera. The pace of change, however, is different. It's about 10 times faster and can be 10 times bigger than what we saw just a few decades ago.
So it's not just the age of AI, it's the age of AI and agility.
Exactly. And I used to hate the word agility because I thought it was a marketing term. But you've got to be agile and you've got to be able to adjust. And so if you watch a startup company today as an example, during the internet era, and even as quickly as 5 years ago, it would take you 2 years to build your product, a year to get 5 or 6 really good references, $1 million run rate, 2 more years to get to 5 million run rate. That was a unicorn in India or in the US coming. Today, you build the product in 1 to 3 months, you get your customer references, $1 million run rate the next quarter, and you're going to hit a $5 million run rate probably in 18 months, maybe 12. That speaks to change, but it isn't just going to be the startups that do this, not just your young Turks that you've been sponsoring, congratulations, for how many years now?
22.
22, wow. So it isn't just the young startups in India or the young startups here. Everybody can either disrupt or get disrupted, but the same thing's going to happen to big companies. People compare it to right before the dot-com bust. I think that is wrong. Now, don't misunderstand me. Are there going to be some spectacular train wrecks with AI and companies that just missed the mode, got overfunded, et cetera? But I'd say, using an American term, I'm trying to learn cricket, as the Olympics hopefully will come to India in the mid-30s coming up. We'll see if we can win that one. But I would compare it to being, in baseball terms, the second inning. So where the internet growth, et cetera, clearly peaked and there was overinvestment in certain categories, Cisco came through it fine, but it was very painful. I think we're in the second inning in terms of what AI is going to represent. I think this will be the decade of AI, and it will be the century of AI. And it will be the foundation to determine economic growth of companies and directions. I'd parallel it, however, to India. I think this decade, and I said this, as you know, I'm the biggest bull optimist on India. You named me that. You named that 8 years ago. But I think this is the decade of India and the century for India. India will become the largest economy in the world. I was the first one to really say that very aggressively. And I will say today, India will probably be, by the end of the century, if we execute right, maybe 90% bigger than the Chinese economy and 30% bigger than the U.S. But if the U.S. and India work together, that's the other thing that can change. So similarities, it's fun watching the leading tech company in each category. Jensen has done an amazing job at Nvidia, but I think they're at the very earlier stage in what can happen. I really believe in that company.
And you still believe we're just scratching the surface as far as AI is concerned today, and the headroom and the potential for growth is explosive from here?
It's unlimited. And what you can do with companies and countries working together is also unlimited. So if you think about it in terms that your viewership will understand, well, there's a lot of number crunching going on with AI and certain applications that are there. The average enterprise is not even in the first inning on using AI in a meaningful way across customer service, across coding, across sales and marketing, interfacing to their customers. It's just getting started in healthcare. AI will help us solve cancer and cure cancer, not in 30 years, but a large part of it in the next decade. So you're just beginning this cycle, and it's kind of like the internet when you first started just doing or entering orders online or doing a little bit of customer service online. That was just the beginning. It will peak many years from now, and then we'll see what's next.
You know, speaking of what's next, John, and since you are a big believer in what AI can potentially do as far as the economy is concerned, you're putting your money where your mouth is, and you're investing in a whole bunch of AI-driven startups, about 20-odd companies in your portfolio, which are AI companies, essentially. What's most exciting about what they're attempting to solve for, what they're attempting to do?
Now you've hit what I love. I love being a part of the internet, and together we change the world, the way you work, live, learn, and play. The next thing I want to do in my life, in the business side, is get startups going around the world, but especially in the U.S. and India, and getting a unique balance there in terms of how the market evolves. So what I'm doing now, I believe startups and small companies getting bigger will be where the entire job growth comes in India and in the U.S. And large companies in total, because of productivity and part of AI, will probably not in total add headcount. So it speaks to the strength of each state in India or the state in the US, 50 in the US, 29 in India. You've got to have startups really driving through it. What am I most excited about? I have 20 startups. 5 of them are really young. But out of the other 15, 9 are already unicorns, which is very unusual for a small fund. We've had 3 of the top exits in the last 2.25 years out of the market selling to strategics. As you know, it's been a terrible year, terrible 2.5 years for venture capital, lowest returns they've seen in 10 years. But with Pensando being sold to AMD, Lisa Su, I really believe in her big time and her vision for AMD. OpenGov being sold to Cox Communications. And then we're recently Dedrone on defense industry, probably the largest transaction that's been done in the defense industry, being sold to Axon. Also was fortunate enough to get Rubrik, one of the top 5 IPOs that are occurring. So I love startups. I love growing them. I love now watching others learn. And I met 2 of my top startups, interesting enough, Unifor and Safe Security, at your session in India with MIT, where they said these are the hottest startups going on in the industry. They turned out to be tremendously successful. So what I'm doing now, I watch for a business marketing transition combined with a new technology. AI as a technology or cybersecurity. I then bet on the CEO for she or he to say, here's where I'm going to go, here's my vision, who wants to be coached. I then go straight to customers. I'm a enterprise person. So I usually know the customers well. I say, what do you think of this company? Is it really differentiable? Is their culture similar to ours, et cetera? And then we outline what we can do together. So I'm more of a coach, a confidant. Even one of my startup CEOs, I get very close to my team, as you know. And he said, would you marry me and my wife? Because I helped coach him through that part of the stage. His struggle with getting the right woman, perfect for him, by the way, that he selected, was harder than him being a great CEO.
Yeah, we know you do all kinds of coaching, John, but
Yes.
let's address your forecast for 2024. You just ended up telling me that it was a challenging 2.5 years for VCs, not for your fund in specific.
We were very fortunate and lucky.
Yeah, you were lucky. But 2024, a better year as far as VCs are concerned, a better year for IPOs. Do you believe that we are likely to see the return of tech IPOs in 2024?
Yes and yes. If you really look at it, I tend to be a little bit contrarian. I don't think I see around corners, but I'm good on pattern recognition. And the market transitions we made and called in the market have been pretty good. All the way back to calling in 2020, there was an issue with a virus coming out of China that was slowing down the Southeast economy. I saw it in my startups in Asia, and I said, this is going to affect the world on it. Also called inflation would displace COVID as the major issue over 2 years ago, which it did, unfortunately. In looking at this year, made the predictions in December of 2023, the number one thing I said, this will be the decade of AI, not the year of AI, the decade. The second thing I said, it'd be the decade of India. India's emergence, not just on a global stage, but India's emergence toward being the number one economy in the world in terms of the direction. In terms of the startups and IPOs, what you watch first is the markets. And the markets in India have been going very strong, as you know.
And in the U.S.
And in the U.S. And so what first moves are the markets. And what moves second is you begin to see M&A activity, which we clearly have. Not big numbers, but reasonably good. That's going to accelerate. Then you see the large companies starting to invest in startups because often they can't move fast enough, especially with AI themselves. They either invest or acquire startups to move. That is usually followed by you get some IPOs going, and then you move back into the normal stage of IPOs. And I think if you're measuring the innovation of a country or a region, tracking unicorns is the right way to go.
Yeah.
But even though the term is out of vogue now, i.e. decacorns, I actually think decacorns is what government leaders should focus on. Once you get a unicorn platform and a series going well. Because when you get to be a decacorn, let's say between 10 billion and 100 billion, there are only 43 in the US today, high tech. That number, in my opinion, in the next 6 or 7 years will go over 100. When you get to be a decacorn, that's when you move from 1,000 or 2,000 people as a unicorn.
So the job creation
10,000.
aspect
That's
kicks in,
where the economic strength for the future. Whichever countries lead in technology, especially in AI, are going to lead in economic growth, defense, et cetera. And that's why I keep pushing back. The combination of the U.S. and India, I think, can change the world, and we ought to dream bigger. So yes, I think barring a political surprise globally, I'm talking about geopolitics on it, I think you can continue to see things improve. When the market keeps going like it is, hitting new highs in India and in the U.S., inevitably IPOs follow because your price of the existing stocks go up.
Yeah.
You want new opportunities, et cetera, on it. And in fairness, the market lost track, and this is where it was similar to 2000. Lost track, it was purely about growth and unreasonable expectations, not a focus on cash flow and profitability. You've seen the
return of that.
You've seen the return of let's run it like a real company, except with agility, as you said earlier, and tremendous speed. So yes, I'm the optimist for that. I am all in. I'm investing on more companies, and my investments are almost entirely in India and in the U.S.
You know, you talk about the India-U.S. relationship, and you've been a big champion and a big believer in the India story, but there's a long distance still to go to fully realize the potential of this partnership and this relationship. Where do you believe it's being constrained today?
Gotcha. I love your questions, and the cool things, we've done this so many times. I know what your current question is, your next one, the one after. So let's first talk about how far it's come. When we outlined in Gujarat, and 2017. I think you were actually there. We talked about major projections that nobody thought were possible. That was in front of Prime Minister Modi. But we projected that India would be the fastest growing country in the world, that India would be the model for the rest of the world, not an emerging country moving into a developed country, but a model for how you did many things. And you see that innovation occurring. You have been the fastest growing economy, and there's still a lot of room to make it more inclusive and to create more jobs, but tremendous progress. As the largest democracy, watching your elections just occurred, and congratulations to Prime Minister Modi. It was a smooth election. There was no issues in the market, and I think that's a model for the rest of the world's democracy to follow. And now you're seeing the country lead in innovation. My challenge is don't be satisfied with just what we're doing. We've got to dream bigger in terms of the overall approach. So this is what I really think about in terms of where we are today. I think we've got to look at where we go. I do think it will be the century for India. I think it will be also the decade for India. And if we do it right by the U.S. and India working together in a partnership that's never been done before. And while there's good progress, I was just at the U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum session in Washington, and with the Democrats and Republicans there, the only thing they agree upon, and they both laughed about it, is the partnership with India. Yeah. But it is the ability to dream. But then let's take the dreams bigger and say, how do we do something no one's ever done before? How do we not only say we have the tightest relationship, and I think President Biden and Prime Minister Modi said it well. They said this is the defining strategic partnership for the 21st century. And what we decide to do as countries will determine the economic future, I think, of a global economy, especially the democracies. But I think we need to dream bigger. Why not do something no one else has done?
Like what?
Let's think of an industrial policy between our two countries. And I normally don't believe in government getting involved, but to your point, this is moving so fast, and you got to be agile. Why wouldn't we outline an unbelievable goal? Global supply chain is broken. Let's say, what do we do in global supply chain? What do we do in manufacturing? What do we do in logistics off of an AI base? And get leaders from both government and business to say, here's what we could do. USISPF, get the CEOs from both the Indian companies and the American companies, and let's dream, how do we really change this? And do what Prime Minister Modi and my views on him haven't changed. I used to say he's one of the top 3 leaders in the world that I've met in my lifetime. He is the best. And I'm excited about what his third term will mean in terms of opportunity. But let's dream even bigger. Let's not just keep going what we've done. And so I think we could change our economic growth maybe about 2 points in India and 1 point in the U.S. by this type of unique partnership. So I want us to dream bigger.
Any specific areas? I mean, you talked about logistics and manufacturing and supply chains, but if I were to ask you to prioritize one area where you believe that enough work has already been done and there is momentum, and we just need to build on that and showcase the ability of what this partnership can deliver.
Yes.
What would that be? What area would that specifically be?
Well, you're right. You always want to show successes, but I think we've shown the successes. So we've done it in defense. We've done it in semiconductor. We've done it in logistics. We've done it fighting COVID together and working together in the way no two countries have done. We've done it with big companies working with government, small companies working with big companies. So now I think we've got to think much more architecturally. Now, to your question is, every industry is going to be affected. So every industry, small or large, every person will become AI capable. And if we would do this together as two countries, I think a speed of movement. So a challenge, let's go back to the number of decacorns we do together. Why shouldn't we have 50 of those 100 increase in decacorns be companies that work very tightly between the U.S. and India? Out of my startups, every one now has their second headquarters in India, much like I did in 2006. I think you're going to see it affect every industry. So from healthcare, pharmaceuticals, the ability to do manufacturing, telecommunications. I think this is what's different. This is why you see this market moving so rapidly. So unlike the internet, which kind of went one industry at a time, entering orders online, customer service, retail and financial services,
we're going to see that parallelly.
They're going to do all together.
You talked about 2006 when you decided to bet on India
Yes.
and move your second headquarter out of the US and set up base in India. And we're now seeing every company virtually set up a global capability center with thousands and thousands of people operating out of India. And it's no longer just the back office kind of work.
It's innovation.
It's innovation, it's R&D, it's IP. What do you believe has resulted in that transition, and what was your big takeaway from the experience going back to 2006?
Well, interestingly enough, I saw the parallels to China. I was one of the first leaders to bet very heavy on China, and that was 1995. If it hadn't worked out, I wouldn't have stayed in the Cisco CEO job very long. But I saw in leadership with Jiang Zemin and the Chinese leadership a willingness to do a win-win type scenario. So I've seen the growth, and we bought outsourcing the manufacturing to China, and candidly, it blossomed. And as you saw, many companies work with Chinese companies, and it was always a win-win with tough negotiations. However, China has lost that leadership, and the trust is no longer there. It's become a win-lose. So my companies don't do business in China. So I think what you see is a parallel here where with India and the U.S. working together, we all of a sudden are learning to dream together. And it doesn't matter if you're talking to political parties in India or political parties here. I think we can dream much higher. And I think we have the capability to do innovation at speed we've never seen before. So that's kind of how I approach the market.
You've always been big on spotting transitions and market transitions, and
Yes.
you talked about AI. But, while we're still in the early stages of adoption,
Yes.
which are the sectors that you believe will see the benefits of AI, will see the disruptions on account of AI, and will impact lives on account of AI? I mean, you talked about healthcare as being one where you don't believe that it'll take us another 10 years to be able to actually start to see the benefits of AI. Which are the sectors that you really see the shift?
Healthcare will see some of those benefits immediately. We're starting to see it on how you treat cancer as an example, or how you gather so much data that you can anticipate a problem coming on before it even becomes obvious. But in sectors that might surprise your viewers, I've been very surprised, and it worries me a lot, that we haven't seen the rapid movement in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity market as a whole was pretty flat this last year, maybe up 1 or 2 points. There were exceptions. CrowdStrike is an example, being an exception on it. What IBM and Palo Alto Networks are doing being an exception. But as AI comes in, cybersecurity can completely have huge damages. The United Healthcare breach, was it 600 million or $1 billion in damages? The MGM issue in terms of the breach, the Clorox issue on supply chain, the deepfakes occurrence with President Biden in New Hampshire, et cetera. I think you're going to see cybersecurity do very well. So my contrarian call here is cybersecurity people overcorrected, put all their money into AI. I think they're now going to realize, especially with new SEC regulation, where the board and the CEO is going to be held accountable. I think that's going to be one of the number 2 hottest areas with AI in the marketplace. Areas I love, deepfakes. A pin drop. You and my accents, we think we can hear each other, but a model using AI, you won't be able to hear difference on. But your voice, if you could imagine, has 8,000 samples per second. In 5 seconds, it's 40,000 samples. You're going to be able to say, was that a machine? Was it a person? If so, which machine, which person? Was it accurate and identify? Voice might be the primary way of authentication. Because if we don't solve these issues, and there's good and bad to AI, there's bad AI that allows these models to occur, good AI who solves it. You have a breakdown in trust with the financial system in society. If we don't know if a political leader is saying something, is that them or is that somebody doing disinformation? So I think cybersecurity is going to be a very hot area. I think it's then going to be the applications that go on top of AI. Because remember, when the internet happened, it was the growth of the Amazons that was on top of the internet that changed retail. I think we're going to see the same thing here. So the application areas like a Unifor that literally provides applications for AI across enterprise way beyond customer service, a good growth area. And next big bets, 2 areas. I think you're going to see some very exciting things in quantum computing. And I think it's going to come quicker than people think now. We've always been 10 years away from quantum computing, just like we've always been 10 years away from AI. AI is clearly here and now. I think quantum's going to occur. And then I think you're going to see, well, it's a narrow area given the market, the capability to do encryption. With the new AI capabilities being a way to break it, we've got to come up with encryption capabilities that protect us. So those are the areas that I kind of get excited about, but I'm after outcomes. I want to know, how does AI change your life? How do the startups allow people in every state in India and every state in the US to really participate in this future, not just a few key cities? Changing the world perhaps one more time. Am I dreaming big enough? Maybe not. Maybe we need to dream bigger.
Well, we will dream bigger, but after a very short break, John, we're going to take a little tour around your beautiful estate and talk about your lessons in leadership. But we're going to come back after a very short break. Stay tuned, don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment with more from Voices from the Valley. Welcome back. You're watching Voices from the Valley. We're in conversation with John Chambers. John, let's talk about lessons in leadership. And I'm asking you this in the context of what we are seeing happen in the world today. It is uncertain. It's moving very fast. Technology is changing. The regulatory environment is hostile for most people at this point in time, or most sectors at this point in time. From your own experience of having dealt with challenges, of having dealt with transitions and change, what is the advice that you would give entrepreneurs today?
Well, when you think about leadership, there are common characteristics that don't change over time. One is outlining a crisp vision of where you're going to go, and don't let the short terms get you out of sync. Focus on where you want to be. I used to say 3 to 5 years out. Today, I'll say 1 to 2 years out. And then you build a great team around you. And if you watch the government of India as an example, the team that Prime Minister Modi's built around him is really solid, and they're going to be continuity after this last election, which is really good. So I look at how well does a leader, she or he, get a team around him that complements their strengths. Third thing is you outline a vision and a strategy. You inspire hope that it's possible to do. Then you say, here's how I'm going to do it. Here's the way we're going to measure success. You regularly report back to your employees, your shareholders, your customers. Your point about agility, you have to be agile in this world. Don't waste a lot of time. My parents are both doctors. They taught me, if you can't change something, focus on what you do control and influence, and don't waste a lot of cycles on what you cannot change. So we're going to have to deal with an uncertain world, an agile world that you said. For the government leaders, I encourage them to think big picture and what we're trying to accomplish, and accomplish things legislative as opposed to regulatory. When you do things by regulation, that can often get you into trouble. Then I think leaders have to dream big and have to have the courage to do that. And then the one thing that many of my startups, and I didn't understand at first either, they get vision and strategy quickly. Culture. Great cultures win. That could be true of a Tata. It could be true of a Unifor that you've talked to while you were here. It was definitely true of a Cisco, definitely true of an Nvidia. And so understand how important your culture is and what it is not in terms of it. And then dream big. That's a common theme for me.
Well, clearly it is a common theme for you, but if I were to ask you to identify some of the key mistakes that you made, but also more importantly, the lessons that you learned from those mistakes and the changes that you made from them.
Okay, so I'm going to add a small transition, as you knew I would going into it. We all like to talk about our successes. So what I enjoyed most of the successes, changing the world with the internet, creating the most valuable company, 10,000 millionaires among our employees my first 10 years there. I won every economic award there was, but also won every corporate social responsibility award there was around the world. Being part of that was really exciting. And even today, when the people that responded to the Wall Street Journal article came out, they said, we saw a vision and we went for it together, and we did on it. So those are successes. Mistakes made, first, if you're taking good business risks, is the only way you're going to get ahead. There are going to be mistakes along the way. And having the courage to make those and then learn from them on it. Mistakes, I've made a lot of them. I've seen every movie at least once, and I've made every mistake at least once as well. But perhaps the one that basic mistakes made a young leader will make is if you have a leader of your team who is working hard and is a good person, but they can't do their job. As a leader, I tried to help them, and I was very patient. And what I didn't realize is when they're not doing their job, it affects the whole team. And then it goes from the problem of the leader to me. So I didn't change many people at Cisco, but we built the strongest team. Moving them at the right time is a mistake, and waiting too long to move them is the mistake that they do. In terms of real big mistakes, doing the same thing right for too long. For 40 quarters, we hit every quarter, plus 1 to 3 cents, and never missed. And my data was so good, I didn't have AI, but I could look at the data from the prior week, the prior month, the prior year, 10 years back, number of sales reps, every order in the world within 3 minutes, et cetera, and predicted it so rapidly. But in 2000, stock market was dropping. And the first week in December, my orders were up 70%. So I thought for the first quarter in 2021, it felt good. And I put out a very conservative forecast of growth around 40%. I'd never been that low. And I thought I was fine. Mid-January, 45 days later, our orders were down 50%. Mathematically impossible. 25% of my customers didn't stop order. They went out of business, went bankrupt. And so when you see trends in the market, you have to understand doing the right thing too long can get you into trouble. And it was terrible because I laid off 7,584 people, all of which I'd hired. They were my extended family on it. I let down my shareholders. People said, are you really the right one to lead Cisco? And that's a fair challenge. We came back stronger than any of our peers, but that doesn't make it any better. So as a leader, I'm more of a product of my mistakes. However, usually I only make the same mistake once. 2007, we saw orders from our financial institutions, 8 of our top 9 banks, slow. And I asked the CEOs, but I know my stuff. I said, all right, what's going on? Tell me, is there something I should be aware of? And they said, no, we're just being a little bit conservative. 8 out of 9? No. I said, there's an economic challenge coming. I think it's going to be severe. My stock got hammered a little bit. But we saw the economic downturn that became the Great Recession in 2008, almost a year ahead of everybody else. And we positioned our company for it. So this time, we actually grew sales. We extended credit to the automotive companies on a world basis. No one would do that at that time. And we powered right through that. So I think learning from your mistakes become key. I've made a lot of them in terms of the overall approach. One of the mistakes that I hope high-tech leaders don't do that we did well the first time was originally when we formed TechNet here in the Valley, we'd go to Washington, D.C., and we'd do a flyby once a year, and we'd tell them how much they're messing up and would fly back out. That was terrible. But we realized over time that government leaders and regulators want to do the right thing. So you invest the time with them and you become part of the process. So at Cisco, we never had an issue anywhere in the world, almost regardless of form of leadership with governments or with regulations. I think it's important that people realize working with governments, especially with the speed that you and I have talked about how quickly things are going to change, is a requirement. And working with all levels toward it and toward a common goal, and set your North Star and be able to handle it. Other mistakes made, when you hit a crisis, realize that at least half of that crisis was self-inflicted. So you correct that at the same time you do the crisis, outline here are the 5 things I'm going to do, here's the way you measure my success. You then provide that input back to your employees, shareholders, etc. And I view crisis as an opportunity, not as an issue that you made a big mistake on. If my startups don't make mistakes, they're never going to grow well.
What you just said about the mistakes that you made and the lessons learned in the conversations that you're having with startup founders who are part of your portfolio companies or CEOs in general, what do you believe they're doing that they shouldn't be today, and what are they not doing enough of?
Well, I think the major thing is they're not moving fast enough. And that's true. I thought I was an expert on AI 8 years ago. I pushed on it before people could even spell it. And I thought I was always the leading edge. It's how fast AI has changed is the mistake that people make. And you've got to almost be not just agile, as we talked earlier, you've got to almost evolve your strategy dramatically every 12 to 18 months. Then you've got to take it from strategy to outcomes. And the great news is your competition isn't going to be AI. It's somebody else with AI, or it's another company that does AI and executes even more. So even though everybody's finally on the bandwagon, I want to get on it and let's go, we're not moving fast enough on how you're going to use it in a differentiated way on your company. The second thing is the mistakes made is, and it's starting to self-correct, is let's make sure that we have profitability and free cash flow very much in line with it. Third thing is change your rule book where appropriate. I think you remember from our prior conversations my golden rules for doing acquisitions, of which I did 180 at Cisco, and I think most people view we were the most successful company in the world on M&A. My startups have done 30 already. But part of the rules was, I put in place, you don't do acquisitions until you've got a very stable management team, you've got a team you're going to run with for a long time, until you've got pretty good momentum, etc. And if you do them locally where you can work with them very closely. That rule book's gone. We do acquisitions now at very early stage with many of my startups. We also, using Unifor as an example again, all 5 of their acquisitions have been outside the U.S. and been very successful so far. I know they'll miss on 1 or 2, but they're doing great on it. So have the courage to change and the ability to adapt to a new marketplace we're in. Now let me reverse it. And I've never interviewed you, but how has your role changed? How has your role with you Young Turks changed? 22 years in terms of the role. How did you have to reinvent yourself in this market? Because your viewers are going to say, well, that's kind of putting you on the spot, which they're going to love. But I think you're a leader in your category that I can learn from, and also your viewers can. So how has your role had to change?
Well, let me start by talking about Young Turks and what I've seen change over the last 22 years. I think less cookie cutter templates, much more depth and much more breadth, much more global in their ambition and aspiration. I think it's been a world of a change there, where people are actually talking about wanting to not just build in India, but build in India for the world, and are now also looking at maybe moving out of India if that serves their purpose better. So I think just the audacity of ambition is something that I've seen change dramatically over the past 2 decades. As far as my own role is concerned, John, 24 years at CNBC, and essentially, running a TV channel, but over the past decade, I think, making business news much more accessible to the layperson, changing the way that people look at business news. It's not just the stock markets. It's not just corporate news. I mean, business impacts every aspect of our lives. Healthcare, education. I mean, why should we not be the providers of actionable, credible information that you can use to make any smart decision, any smart choice in your life, not just when it comes to investments or personal finance. So I think just changing the way that people see business news and engage with business news, and digitization. I mean, we could sort of bury our head in the sand and say we're a TV channel, but we have to have the humility to engage with our customer the way that the customer wants to engage with us. So if they want us on our mobile phone, we've got to be on the mobile phone. If they want to see us on Instagram, we have to be on Instagram. I can't say, if you want to see me, you've got to come to CNBC-TV18 and watch me on the box. So I think that's really been part of the reinvention, is to have the humility to chase the customer and not expect the customer to come to us, and repurpose and reinvent and reimagine the way that we tell stories, the kinds of stories we tell, who we tell stories about. I think it's been an exciting experience. It's been a lot of unlearning. The 60-minute formats have gone. You're now doing 30-second reels and 15-second videos. So I think it's been a lot of unlearning and a lot of learning as well.
Well, having fun the same way. Your biggest success, and what would be the one do-over you'd like to do differently?
I think the biggest success has really been to create enduring brands like Young Turks. I mean, that have stood the test of time.
They are amazing.
So I think that's been pretty special. The one thing that I would do over, perhaps tell my younger self to not overthink things so much. I think, you weigh yourself down by worrying too much about the future. And I think just learning to live in the moment and enjoying the present and the moment is something that I've learned to do now. But I think it comes with experience, and it comes with age, and it comes with having been around the block. So I think
and making mistakes.
And making mistakes and learning from them. So that's the one part that I would do over.
So for all the startups listening, that's the exact example for CEOs. That's how you ought to think about it. Prioritization, very important to do. Don't overthink. Get your top 3 issues. Do those well. 20% of the effort gets 80% of the results. And enjoy it as we go along.
I enjoyed being interviewed by John Chambers. I never thought that was going to happen, but it did. John, what an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, as always. Thank you for the learning, and thank you for giving us your forecast of what 2024 and the next decade potentially could look like, and what AI could do to our world and the way that it is shaped today. Appreciate your time, as always.
Friends for life.
Friends for life.
I am the biggest optimist, the biggest bull on India and the U.S.-India relationship, plus AI.
Absolutely, I know that, and I'm sure we're going to be having much more conversation about this when you visit India later this year. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Voices from the Valley. From all of us here on the team, for now, goodbye, and many thanks for watching.